Thank you very much. How do we start these salutations? I'm not very good at protocols, so I'll just sum it up. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Notwithstanding the generalization, I will still have to specially recognize a few people. In the course of the recognitions, they left someone who is very, very special. We're talking about family, my elder sister is recognized. We're talking about family, my wife is recognized. And we're talking about family, I'm a married man with children, and my son is here. Junior Airman Goto Bula, rise of recognition. Thank you very much for taking out time to be here. This is a book presentation, a book unveiling, and it is necessary that I take a little time to speak to you on why you are here, on why you are here. I'm seeing one of my little sister, Bright, she's here. Bright Agagbe is a daughter to our mother in Boko, Mrs. Sedin Agagbe. So the Boko crew, you'll be specially recognized as the event goes on. Why we are here? We are here physically under the organization of the Learning Center. That's a group of people, the organization that powered this event. And we have here Bestin, we have Bennett, we have Felix, we have Hope, we have Tim, we have Stephanie. They are all great people. I need to recognize you. You may be at the background and nobody will know you're here. We need to take time to recognize you too. In this month of June, we have some very greats. Great greats in the sense that there are people who are very, very important to me and very close to me. And it so happens that we're having this occasion in June. These are people I need to recognize especially by virtue of their birthdays in this June. First and foremost, I will recognize my amiable wife, Mrs. Deborah Wilfred Bula, the one I refer to as the amazing one. Amazing one. I refer to as the amazing one. Her birthday was like 2 weeks ago. A couple of you here were also there where we celebrated her. And yesterday, in the course of the work we are doing, another great friend of mine from childhood had his birthday, but it went unnoticed because of the preparation. It's an honor to also recognize and celebrate my friend Timothy Agus with his time. Where is he? Timothy Agus. Yesterday was his birthday. It went largely unnoticed. We couldn't even have a drink. We're busy preparing and knotting everything to make this occasion successful. I remember he had to take off yesterday as part of his birthday today, say to dig a borehole for a community. A great one there. Congratulations, sir. And then today, another great son of Benue, a great son of Tiv, a great son of Ipia. The one whom we just called up to the high table, even as the guest, the book reviewer. Today happens to be his birthday. Congratulations, sir. Dr. Oliver Gundu. So you see, I am surrounded by great men who happen to be born, great men and an amazing woman who happen to be born in June, and that makes this celebration in June also a great one. Happy birthday to you all. I will recognize just 2 people, then I go on. And then the MC will take over the recognitions thereafter. Mr. Frederick Baum is a representative of the Vice Chancellor of Benue State University, Professor Tuoyorapu. He called me up yesterday. Frederick Baum, you're welcome. The VC called me up yesterday and told me it was quite unfortunate he had to leave for Abuja for an official assignment. The VC and I have had a long-standing relationship right from days in Jos. And then I have here just walked in, the one I call the Major of Majors. When I was in the House of Assembly, he was my majority leader. Though we impeached him halfway through, but I still call him Major. Right Honorable High Secretary. Finally, everyone has his roots. I said two, but finally it's not amongst the numbers. Everyone has his roots. All the guys from Coke, my people, Dr. Yokwa, Gwelu Monava, Orwanka. Please just rise up as I'm calling. Look at my people, I don't need to have their names. Gwelu Monava, the light is blocking. Okay, Teso Acha. Teso Acha is my personal assistant. Gwelu Muava is my director of policy, planning and statistics, Bula, the Man Bula 2023, Bokutaka. Dr. Ankia is there, and Dr. Yopua. You know, we have a lot of doctors in Libya land. Please be seated, you are welcome. I have also Chris. Chris was my PA when I was in the House of Assembly, my legislative assistant, and my brother Telumo Tabe. We are here because we want to see what is written in the covers of that book that is there covered. And as the banners went out yesterday, the invitations went out yesterday, a couple of people called me asking why and how is it that a man like you should be writing on a topical, sensible, topical issue like marriage. And without asking them why they thought I was not qualified, I knew why they thought so. And I told them that the area of your greatest challenge is the area of your calling. The area, not it from today, the area of your greatest challenge is the area of your calling. In any area you find out that it is becoming difficult to break out, you walk out of it and lay a path for others who would have fallen into such pitfalls. I've traversed the route of marriage. I've scaled a lot of pitfalls that a lot of people who have gone through my challenges won't have been alive standing here speaking. I have been twice married, 7 children from 3 different women. That is enough a PhD qualifier to speak on the topic of marriage. So for you to be here is because an encyclopedia and an authority on the subject of marriage who has gone through it and who is standing to tell you how not to go through the part 2 is talking to you. And by the grace of God, I've counseled a lot of people in the course of this work before I put it together. The work is a compendium of mostly my personal experiences and my experiences while mentoring and counseling people in the course of marriage. So this is my first published work. My first published work. And I love what the British essayist Piper Aya said. He said the beauty of any first time is that it leads to 1,000 others. The beauty of every first time is that it leads to 1,000 others. And I tell you that this is my first outing, and I bet you many more will come in quick succession. Many. So I'll tell you a story in opening. That there was this certain man who would leave his home early every morning under the guise of looking for the proverbial daily bread for his family. Daily his wife and children will look up to his return with the needed food, only for him to show up reeking of alcohol and a mixture of acrid smell of onions on suya. You know that smell? Onions on suya. And he will dangle a toothpick between his lips. He was remorseless in his pitiable show of disdainful irresponsibility. He was remorseless. And he would gleefully, unpretentiously announce after that display to his household that hustle no good today, hustle no good today. And everything that is showing from him is reeking of alcohol. He didn't drink it on credit, suya, and the evidence will be too big, but hustle no good today. So after a while, the family gave up on him and resorted to self-help. That is just the way. So, but the question remains: what manner of children would the society be expecting to get from such a family? What manner? It is the discipline they get and what they see that will bring into the society. Fundamentally, what we are saying is that it is the home front that determines the moral standing of the society. And the act of that man is even like our political leadership systems. What our political leadership systems exhibit today. It engages, I'm talking of our political leadership system, in primitive, high level of primitive personal acquisitions at our expense and flaunts them before us in proud ignominy, while we, in submissive hopelessness and destitutive placement, we celebrate them, we project them, we defend their very act, the same very act that impoverishes us. It's like that man who goes out to eat, he comes out, tells his family, hustle no good. But the leadership system we have today is the same picture that shows primitive acquisition, and yet we clap for them. We clap for them. Someone reminded me, told me that is what is called the Stockholm Syndrome. You can look it up. It's a psychological state of being that makes you to be very comfortable with your abductors. Somebody who abducts you, you become friendly with him. You become comfortable. So that level of primitive acquisition at our expense, we have become comfortable with it. In other words, we have got into the disorders, the psychological disorder called the Stockholm Syndrome. May God take us out of that. So in fact, the same leadership systems, the only constant in their program is the purposeful drive that makes the followers subservient in poverty, hunger, and need, while they remain the only rallying point for Sukon, albeit they remain the only one-eyed man in the village of the blind. So you must resort to them. You must resort to them. And again I ask, what does the society expect in return in the quest for a brand new leadership in the morrow? When all that a prodigy knows, one who is serving or learning under this class of leaders, is a subversive and oppressive leadership style. So what we are having is just a vicious circle. Somebody say vicious circle. So how did we get here? Simply, it is a breakdown in morals and training at the foundation of the society. And like I said earlier on, the foundation of the society is the home. And that is what we are doing at the Home Heritage Ministries and at the Learning Center. Building back our homes, grooming our homes, and building a better society. Every society is a reflection of the people that give life to its being. And so, our leadership recruitment process is tailored around the thoughts and actions of a majority of the active people that make up the society. Now you begin to ask, who are the active people? I'll give you a statistics. The active people will take a statistic from the 2019 2019 gubernatorial elections in Benue. 2,471,000 people registered to vote. Total vote cast, both from the APC, the PDP, the whatever, total vote cast was just 846,000. This represented just about 34%. Represented just 34%. In other words, these 34% are the active people. Though the 66% that are inactive are in the majority. But for the purpose of changing leadership or speaking for leadership, they become a minority, even in their majority. Now, out of these 434,000 that was gathered by 434,000 votes out of the 846 that was cast, 434,000 was gathered by the winner, which represents just 17.5%. What am I trying to lead us to? I want to define the active citizens here for you to know why we are here. So these statistics, what does it show? It shows that we are actually a sleeping society. Sleeping, docile. So no wonder we are full of these tools. And the Bible says in Matthew 13:23, said, but while men slept, the enemy came and sowed tears. The enemy came and sowed what? These tools. So the things we do not want are the things that happen to us by virtue of our inability to rise up and make the necessary change that will affect us and our generation in the positive. Now there's this saying that I love so much by Albert Einstein, the German theoretical physicist. He said, I love him not for his accomplishment in physics. I love him much more for his quotes. He said the world is not dangerous because of those who do harm. It's not because of them. What is their percentage? The percentage of those who do harm to the society is equivalent to the percent, let me say like the 17% that came out to vote for the government. Very minute number. He said it's not because of those who do harm, but because of those who look at it without doing anything. Albert Einstein. Show me the leader, I will tell you who the people are. So if we complain that we have a sleeping president, if we complain that we have an inactive governor, then we should look at ourselves. We are actually the sleeping people. Show me the leader, I will tell you who the people are. Now this is true because even as I stated before in the statistics, leaders are a product of the people. No leader ever emerges without the support of the majority of its active citizens. Now I had already defined what the active citizens are. Though the active may be a minority, but because the majority are docile and inactive, they inadvertently become irrelevant. And I always say this, and I'm yet to be countered, that nobody can rig in an election where he is not popular. Nobody. If you remove the rigging factor out of the votes of Otom in 2019, remove the rigging factor out of the votes of Jime in 2019, Otom will have still won. He will have still won. So nobody rigs where he is not popular. It is the degree of his popularity that gives him a window to rig. When I contested the election in 2007, and I had heavy challenge in my council ward, where ACN at that time was very strong by virtue of the strength of a certain godfather. We had 20 polling units in my council ward. Notwithstanding that strength, I still won in my polling unit because I didn't see who would come and beat me in my polling unit. You cannot rig where you are not popular. So the challenge in nation building and the causes of infrastructural decay in the country today is the lack of a qualitative leadership recruitment process. And this bears root in morals we are ingrained with at the formative stages from our homes. That is why this book is out at this time. When we talk about the fullness of marriage, we are going back to the roots. The type of leaders we have, we check them. There is a fundamental decay from the homes. We grew up in a society that we knew each other. There are some of our friends who walked naked on the street by virtue of insanity. However, to whatever level in which they got cured of insanity, they still show traces. That is how it is when that foundation is laid. It's impossible to remove every trace of it. It's like a cancer. It's like a cancer. So for instance, Ape Aku remains to date the referral yardstick for measuring democratic good governance in Benue. And he didn't just happen on us. He didn't come to us like an accident. He was well trained. He had well-trained roots in administration from the Benue Plateau State, where he had even challenged the authorities on issues of corruption. So he prepared himself that when the opportunity came upon him, he wouldn't go through the path which he had publicly challenged. Now he went back to our local government systems, became a chairman of a local government before rising up to be a governor. A system that has now been completely neglected. So he did just happen on us. So when people are talking of Ape Aku as a referral, it is not an accident. It is because he was trained on it. He was prepared for it. These foundational learning and growing opportunities are no longer available in our polity, thereby robbing the society of the needed experience on the job for impactful representation. Impactful representation. There is no man that goes into the legislature on a first stint that does not mess up to some great extent. I'm happy my majority leader is saying he was privileged to go for 2 terms. He tried the 3rd term, the people in his place told him to come back. I was one guy, you are not the only one. But he will agree with me that since politics came to Benue, maybe just 2 or 3 people have moved with that experience from the state legislature to the federal house. I think Ati and then the former speaker, and who again? See how old politics is. What are we doing? We are robbing ourselves of the needed experience to gain when we go to the federal level. That is why we carry people who are new. They don't even know what standing rules are. You take them to Abuja, they don't even know where Maitama is. They don't know the colors of legislation. So it takes them a whole 4 years to understand the rigors, whereas you have experiences wasting back home. Experiences wasting back home. And I'm happy that the Gogo Taka people are not doing that mistake this time. Hallelujah. Amen. Am I speaking? Yes. So until we build and develop our experiential levels, interrogating and correcting ourselves in the process, we will only continue living on our trail the mark of subjective ineptitude along the political space. So one man came some time back in respect to training and said he was born without shoes. You know that man. And he exuded poverty to win our favor as a sign of humility. You know, they come to us with all manners of colorations. Say they had no shoes. And what is that? Exuding poverty. My brothers, poverty is not a qualifier for humility. In fact, most of the people with such background tend to end up being the meanest. They exert some primitive form of vengeance in anger to society for making them go through what they went through. So you don't look at that as a qualifier. So if you do not have a foundation that makes you to see wealth, if you do not have that kind of foundation, self-accumulation, self-acquisition, will be to you everything that matters. You will definitely not be able to manage wealth if you have not had a foundation on seeing wealth as a vanity. You will only exhibit acts of depravity. You will look at life as a competition. You will remember that childhood struggle. Now me will chop this meat, now me pick this meat first. You know, to beat another person to a piece of meat. That attitude they carry even to the highest office. They carry it. So until you are trained, you can never train. For you to be a trailblazer, you must be trained. And it is not just about training, you must exhibit the experience you have got in training in practical application. So what must we do? An American writer, William Faulkner, said, "You cannot swim for new horizons until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore." You cannot swim to new horizons. You know, when you get the ocean, even if you are not swimming, you are in a boat. By the time the boat starts leaving the shore, you are no longer seeing land. If you have a phobia for water, you start getting jittery. Talk less of one who is swimming. So if you cannot swim for new horizon until you lose courage to lose sight of shore, you cannot. That is what William Faulkner said. So what is the challenge? We must therefore go back and reinstill values in our homes. We must rebuild the right foundation for our society. That is why this book has come at a time such as this. We must be bold to stand firm against what is wrong, though seen as the norm, even if it means standing alone. Just take a look at our democratic checks and balancing systems, for instance. Whereas the legislature ought to stand strong and check the exercises of the executive in all areas, they chicken out and become completely subservient. And by this singular act, they make the executive to become irresponsible. I've shared this line of thought with a lot of people. I told them that even if you bring a stone to make him a governor or the president, and you have the quality that is required in the legislature, that president will perform. But I hear in some states that some speakers are calling their governors that. That is bastardization, not just of the constitution, of humanity generally. This is even like that docile woman who sat quietly in submissive foolishness and allowed her husband to grow from carelessness to irrepressible irresponsibility. She just sat down quietly. Every time man come and reek him with alcohol with toothpick, and then she say, it's okay, now my husband. Until the woman understands that her submission is not for imbecilic and stupid subjection, she will miss the application of the potency of the power inherent in her being from creation. In fact, she will become an embarrassment to her creator for her inability to exhibit purpose. Subjection is not stupidity. Subjection is not stupidity. When you get a copy of this book, you see it reeled out. William Gould, in another British novelist, said, "I think women are foolish to think they are equal to men." He said, "They are superior and always have been." Even as I captured in this book that you are all here to witness, the book that you are all here to witness, it's unveiling an official presentation to the world. I captured somewhere in it. I said the woman is the home molder. She's the builder, she's the preserver. She has no grounds for creation and intervention. She has no responsibility towards originating and bringing home. She has no responsibility to that. It is the man that brings home. The man will go out, bring the raw yam, she will cook it, and it will become food. She changes the gold ore to find beautiful gold. Rather, what is it? She makes the best out of everything that is given to her by the man. She is principally subjected to whatever he brings forth with a duty of making it better and turning it into a finished product. That is why for those of you who do sciences or you know about this humanities, the physiology of man, you know that you give a woman an X chromosome and she will mold you a woman. So it is stupidity in men who say my wife is giving birth to female. It's a stupid man. It is what you give her. Whatever you give her, even the determination of the sex of the child, it is what the man gives her. So give the woman an X and she will mold you a woman. Give her a Y and she will give you a man. She is just to make better. But if you take that sperm and drop it here, it will be a waste. So the women must understand the power in perfection that God has placed them under women, not under the men. So when they waste their time talking about equality, it's a very dangerous, devilish diversion. Whereas the power is there. I told a couple of guys in the meeting, I said, the man is just like a balloon, inflated balloon, just one pin, boom, it's down. If a woman understands that, the man will be very careful when it comes around her. So the legislature, in closing, is a woman. The wife of the executive's youth. You here today are witnesses to the birthing of a new generation. A well-groomed, focused, and morally right society. A people trained, experienced, and mandated generation. That is what we are doing. A generation from the fullness of marriage. Thank you very much. You are all welcome.